You guys, I'm literally shaking as I tell you this story. My name's Emma, and what my own parents did to me is so messed up that I still can't believe it actually happened. But before I get into the crazy details, let me ask you something. Would your parents charge you money to sleep in the same house where your brothers live for free? Because that's exactly what happened to me. Picture this. I come home from college, broke as hell with student loans up to my eyeballs, and my parents, the people who are supposed to love me unconditionally, hand me a freaking invoice, $350 a month, to share a room, while my two older brothers, Tyler and Jake, who are 26 and 28, get to live in their childhood bedrooms rent-free. But wait, it gets worse. So much worse. I'm 24, and after 4 years at Northwestern University in Illinois, I thought I was coming home to my family in our cozy suburban Michigan house. You know the type. 2-story colonial, manicured lawn, basketball hoop in the driveway. The American dream, right? Wrong. The moment I walked through that front door, something felt off. Mom gave me this weird, tight smile, and Dad wouldn't even look me in the eye. I should have known something was up when they led me straight to the basement. "So, honey," Mom said, wringing her hands like she was about to deliver bad news, "we've made some changes while you were away." Changes? That's one way to put it. They'd completely erased me from the house. My bedroom, the room I'd lived in for 18 years, was now Mom's craft room, filled with scrapbooking supplies and her sewing machine. Every single trace of me was gone, like I'd never existed. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad cleared his throat and pointed toward the basement. "We set up a nice space for you down there. You'll be sharing with Ashley." Ashley. My cousin Ashley, who'd been living with us for 6 months after her divorce. The same Ashley who hadn't worked a day since moving in and spent her time binge-watching Netflix and ordering DoorDash with money she definitely didn't have. But here's the kicker, and I swear this is where my jaw literally hit the floor. Dad handed me a piece of paper. "A rental agreement. For my own family's house. $350 a month," he said casually, like he was talking about the weather. "Split between you and Ashley. First month due now." I looked around, waiting for someone to say, "Just kidding." But Tyler walked right past us, heading upstairs to his private room, the room he'd had since he was 12, without paying a dime. Same with Jake, who was sprawled on the living room couch in his pajamas at 2 p.m, unemployed for the 3rd time this year. "Dad," I said slowly, "are Tyler and Jake paying rent too?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Guys, if you're watching this and you think your family has issues, trust me, you haven't heard anything yet. What happened next is going to blow your minds. And honestly, it changed everything I thought I knew about my own parents. Make sure you hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I seriously need to know I'm not crazy for feeling completely betrayed by this. And definitely follow the channel because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory, and you're not going to want to miss what comes next. So there I was, standing in my childhood home with a rental agreement in my hands, feeling like I'd stepped into some twisted alternate reality. I mean, what kind of parents charge their own daughter rent while letting their sons live for free? But you guys, it was about to get so much worse. The basement room they'd set up for me was basically a joke. Picture this. They'd hung up a cheap shower curtain to divide the space in half. On one side was Ashley's area. And let me tell you, my cousin had really made herself at home. Her clothes were everywhere. Empty takeout containers stacked on a TV tray, and the whole space smelled like stale pizza and that weird vanilla candle she was obsessed with. My side, a twin-sized air mattress, a folding table from Walmart, and exactly one electrical outlet. One, for my laptop, phone charger, and the tiny lamp they'd thrown down there as an afterthought. "This is temporary, right?" I asked Mom, as she showed me around like it was some kind of luxury apartment. "Well, honey, that depends on how quickly you find a job and get back on your feet," she said, not even trying to hide the passive-aggressive tone. "We just think it's time you learned some responsibility." Responsibility? I just graduated magna cum laude with a degree in marketing, but sure, Mom, tell me more about responsibility. Meanwhile, Tyler was upstairs blasting his Xbox, a brand new PlayStation 5 that I'd seen Dad bring home just last week. Tyler, who'd dropped out of community college twice, and whose idea of job hunting was scrolling through Indeed.com for 5 minutes before declaring there was nothing good out there. And Jake? Don't even get me started on Jake. This guy had been finding himself for the past 2 years, which apparently meant sleeping until noon, eating everything in the fridge, and leaving his dirty dishes for Mom to clean up. But somehow, He got to keep his corner bedroom with the attached bathroom. That first night in the basement, I couldn't sleep. Not just because Ashley snored like a freight train, but because I kept thinking about the look on Dad's face when he handed me that rental agreement. It was like he was proud of himself, like he was teaching me some valuable life lesson. But here's what really got to me. I'd heard them talking upstairs around midnight. The heating vents in that old house carried sound like you wouldn't believe, and I could hear Mom and Dad having a conversation in their bedroom. "Do you think we're being too hard on her?" Mom asked. "Linda, she needs to understand that the real world isn't going to coddle her," Dad replied. "Tyler and Jake are different. They're still figuring things out." "Different how? Because they're boys? Because they're older?" I was lying there in the dark, trying to understand what made me so different that I deserved to pay for the privilege of sleeping in my own family's basement. The next morning, I tried talking to Tyler about it. Big mistake. "Dude, you're being dramatic," he said, not even looking up from his cereal. "It's just rent. Everyone pays rent. Do you pay rent?" I asked. He actually laughed. "Nah, but that's different. I'm saving up to move out." Saving up with what money? The guy hadn't had a job in 8 months. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about teaching me responsibility or preparing me for the real world. This was about something else entirely. Something that made my stomach turn when I really thought about it. But I had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole went, and what I was about to discover would change everything I thought I knew about my family. 3 days into my basement prison sentence, Mom called a family meeting. You know those meetings, the kind where parents pretend everyone gets a say, but really, they've already made up their minds about everything. We all gathered in the living room after dinner. Well, everyone except Ashley, who'd conveniently disappeared to run errands right before the meeting started. Smart girl. "So," Dad began, settling into his recliner like he was about to deliver a presidential address, "we need to discuss some ground rules now that Emma's back home." Ground rules. For the daughter who'd never gotten so much as a speeding ticket. But sure, let's have ground rules. Mom pulled out an actual notebook, I kid you not, and started reading like she was announcing new legislation. First, rent is due on the 1st of every month. No exceptions. Second, common areas need to be cleaned up immediately after use. Third, no guests without 24 hours notice. I looked around the room, waiting for someone to mention that Tyler's buddy Marcus had basically been living on our couch for the past month, eating our food and leaving beer cans everywhere. But apparently, that rule only applied to me. "What about Tyler and Jake?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Do these rules apply to everyone?" Jake snorted. "I've been living here for 28 years, Em. I think I know how the house works. And you've been paying rent for 28 years? I shot back. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad cleared his throat and gave me that look, the one that used to make me apologize for asking perfectly reasonable questions when I was a kid. "Emma, your brothers have different circumstances," Mom said carefully. "They're contributing to the household in other ways." Other ways? I wanted to scream. Tyler's contribution was eating everything in the fridge and leaving dirty clothes all over the bathroom. Jake's contribution was, well, I honestly couldn't think of a single thing Jake contributed besides his charming personality and the occasional lawn mowing when Dad literally bribed him with cash. But then Tyler said something that made my blood run cold. "Besides, it's not like you really belong here anymore anyway. You've been gone for 4 years. This is our house now. Our house. Not the family house. Not Mom and Dad's house. Their house." The way Mom and Dad exchanged glances told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't some temporary arrangement until I got back on my feet. This was them pushing me out, making it so uncomfortable and expensive that I'd have no choice but to leave. But why? What had I done wrong? I'd been the perfect daughter. Good grades, no trouble, never asked for anything. I'd even worked 2 jobs through college to minimize my student loans, while they'd paid for Tyler's first 2 years at community college before he dropped out. That night, I decided to do some investigating, and what I found in Dad's home office would explain everything, and make me realize just how calculated this whole thing really was. Okay, guys, this is where things get absolutely insane. I'm talking soap opera level family drama that would make Jerry Springer jealous. So that night after the family meeting from hell, I couldn't sleep. Again. But this time, it wasn't just because of Ashley's snoring or the uncomfortable air mattress. Something Tyler had said kept bugging me. This is our house now. What did he mean by that? Around 2 a.m, I crept upstairs to get some water. The house was dead quiet, and as I passed Dad's home office, I noticed he'd left his computer on. The screen was dark, but the power light was glowing. Now, I'm not normally the type to snoop, but you guys have to understand, I was desperate for answers. Why was I being treated like a stranger in my own home? Why were my brothers getting a free ride while I was being charged like some random tenant? I jiggled the mouse, and Dad's desktop appeared. He hadn't even bothered to log out. And right there on the screen was an open document that made my heart stop. It was my grandfather's will. My grandfather, my dad's father, had passed away 2 years ago while I was still in college. I'd come home for the funeral, of course, but I'd never heard anything about his will or what he'd left behind. Turns out, there was a very good reason for that. According to the document on Dad's screen, Grandpa had left the house we were all living in, to all 3 of his grandchildren. That's right, Tyler, Jake, and me. Equal shares. But here's the kicker, and I swear I read this part like 5 times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Grandpa had specifically stated that the house couldn't be sold or transferred until all 3 grandchildren were established and settled in their adult lives. He'd defined that as either being married, owning their own home, or reaching the age of 30. Tyler was 26. Jake was 28. I was 24. This meant that in 2 years, when Jake turned 30, he and Tyler could potentially force a sale of the house and cut me out entirely. But even worse than that, they were planning to charge me rent on a house that I technically owned 1/3 of. I sat there in Dad's office chair, staring at the screen, feeling like the world had tilted off its axis. My own parents and brothers had been lying to me for 2 years. They'd been collecting rent money from me while knowing I was part owner of the property. But as I kept reading, I found something that made my hands literally shake with anger. There was an email thread between Dad, Tyler, and Jake from 3 months ago, right around the time I was getting ready to graduate. They'd been planning this whole thing. The rental agreement, the basement setup, even Ashley moving in to make it seem like I was just another roommate. The plan was simple. Make living at home so miserable and expensive that I'd move out on my own. Once I was gone, they could claim I'd abandoned my interest in the property. And if that didn't work, they'd just wait until Jake turned 30 and try to force me to sell my share for way less than it was worth. I screenshotted everything on my phone. Every single page of the will, every email, every document I could find. Because you guys, I was about to give my family a lesson in what happens when you mess with the wrong person. But first, I needed to make a phone call that would change everything. Have you ever had one of those moments where everything suddenly makes perfect sense, but also makes you want to burn the world down? Yeah, that was me at 3 a.m., sitting in my dad's office, staring at legal documents that proved my own family had been scamming me. I took screenshots of everything, and I mean everything. The will, the email threads, even some bank statements that showed Dad had been depositing money into a separate account. Money that I now realized was probably my rent payments, which legally belonged to me anyway since I owned part of the house. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I called a lawyer. I found Patricia Hendricks online, a family law attorney in downtown Grand Rapids with amazing reviews. Her consultation fee was $150, which was money I definitely didn't have, but I figured it was worth going into more debt to understand what the hell was happening to my life. Emma, Patricia said after I'd explained the whole situation, you need to understand something. What your family is doing isn't just morally wrong, it's legally fraudulent. Fraudulent. That word hit me like a ton of bricks. She explained that by collecting rent from me without telling me I owned the property, they were essentially stealing from me. And the fact that they'd been planning to squeeze me out of my inheritance, that was called undue influence, and it was illegal as hell. Here's what we're going to do, Patricia said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. Apparently, she lived for cases like this. We're going to file for immediate recognition of your ownership rights, and we're going to demand an accounting of all rent payments you've made. Plus, we're going to seek damages for the fraudulent behavior. Damages. As in, they might have to pay me money for what they'd done. But Patricia wasn't finished. Emma, there's something else. According to your grandfather's will, you have the right to live in the house rent-free until you reach the age of 30 or meet the other conditions. Your parents can't charge you rent on property you own. I walked out of that law office feeling like I could conquer the world. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the victim of some cruel family joke. I was a property owner who'd been illegally charged rent by her own parents. But I didn't want to show my cards right away. Oh no, I had a much better plan. I went home and acted like nothing had happened. I even handed Dad my second month's rent payment, $350 cash, just like he'd demanded. He smiled and thanked me, telling me how proud he was that I was taking responsibility. The irony was almost too much to handle. That afternoon, while everyone was out, Tyler at his part-time job at Best Buy, yes, the 26-year-old finally had a job, Jake at the gym, and Mom and Dad at their weekly grocery shopping trip, I did something that felt absolutely incredible. I went upstairs to my old bedroom, Mom's craft room, and started moving her stuff out. Every scrapbook, every roll of ribbon, every single craft supply went into boxes. I carried it all down to the basement, right to the space where I'd been sleeping for the past month. If she wanted to do crafts, she could do them in the basement. After all, according to the rental agreement, I was paying for that space. Then I moved my stuff back into my childhood bedroom, my real bedroom, the bedroom that technically I had every right to occupy. When they came home and found me unpacking in Mom's craft room, you should have seen their faces. Dad turned bright red. Mom started sputtering about disrespect, and Tyler actually had the nerve to tell me I was crossing the line. Actually, I said calmly, I'm just moving into my bedroom, in my house, the house I own 1/3 of. The silence that followed was deafening, and that's when I knew they realized their little scam was over. But what happened next? That's when things got really interesting. The moment I said my house, you could have heard a pin drop. Dad's face went from red to completely white. Mom grabbed onto the doorframe like she was about to fall over, and Tyler, oh man, Tyler looked like he'd seen a ghost. What are you talking about? Mom whispered, but I could tell by her voice that she knew exactly what I was talking about. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots. Every single document, every email, every piece of evidence that proved they'd been lying to me for months. Grandpa's will, I said simply. The will that left this house to Tyler, Jake, and me. The will that gives me the right to live here rent-free until I'm 30. The will that you've been hiding from me while charging me money for my own property. Dad tried to bluster his way out of it. Emma, you don't understand. There are expenses, maintenance costs. Bullshit, I cut him off. And honestly, I'd never used that word with my parents before, but I was done being the polite little daughter. I found the bank statements, Dad. You've been putting my rent money into a separate account. Money that legally belongs to me anyway. That's when Jake walked in, took one look at the scene, and asked what was going on. When I explained, he actually had the audacity to laugh. So what, Emma? You're gonna sue us? Your own family? I already have, I said quietly. And guys, the look on their faces when I said that, absolutely priceless. Pure shock, followed by panic, followed by the kind of anger that tells you everything you need to know about people's true character. You what? Dad roared. I hired a lawyer, Patricia Hendricks. She's filing papers tomorrow morning for recognition of my ownership rights, an accounting of all the rent payments I've made, and damages for fraud. Mom started crying. Not the sad kind of crying, but the angry, manipulative kind she used to do when she wanted me to feel guilty about something as a kid. How could you do this to us? She sobbed. We're your family. Family, I repeated slowly. Right. Is that what we're calling it when you lie to someone for months? Steal their money and try to cheat them out of their inheritance? Tyler stepped forward, and for a second, I thought he might actually try to intimidate me. But I wasn't the scared little girl who used to hide in her room when her brothers got angry anymore. You're being dramatic, he said. We weren't trying to cheat you out of anything. I pulled up the email thread on my phone and started reading out loud. Tyler's email to Dad. If we make it expensive enough, she'll move out on her own, and we won't have to deal with her claiming the property later. Should I keep reading? The fight went on for another hour. Dad tried every manipulation tactic in the book. Guilt, anger, threats, even attempting to ground me like I was still 16 years old. Mom kept crying and asking how I could tear the family apart over money. Tyler and Jake took turns calling me selfish, ungrateful, and dramatic. But here's the thing. I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Finally, I said the words that ended the whole charade. I want all of you out of my room in the next 5 minutes, or I'm calling the police to report trespassing. Trespassing? Dad sputtered. This is my house. Actually, it's not. It's Grandpa's house. And according to his will, I have as much right to be here as any of you. More right, actually, since you've been illegally profiting off my share. They left. All of them. And for the first time in months, I slept in my own bed, in my own room, in my own house. But you guys, the real drama was just getting started. The next morning, everything hit the fan. And I mean everything. Patricia filed the papers just like she'd promised, and apparently my parents got served at Dad's work. Can you imagine? He's sitting in his office at the insurance company where he's worked for 15 years, and a process server shows up with legal documents accusing him of defrauding his own daughter. Mom called me crying. Again, but this time it was different. She was scared. "Emma, please," she begged. "Can't we work this out as a family? Do we really need lawyers involved? We stopped being a family the moment you decided to lie to me and steal my money," I told her. And guys, saying that out loud felt both terrible and incredibly liberating at the same time. But here's where the story gets really crazy. Because once word got out about the lawsuit, and in a small town like ours, legal drama spreads faster than wildfire. Other family members started reaching out to me. My Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, called that afternoon. "Emma, honey, I need to tell you something," she said, "about your cousin Ashley. Remember Ashley? My unemployed cousin who'd been living in the basement with me, the one I'd been forced to split the rent with? Turns out Ashley wasn't paying rent at all. She'd been telling my parents that she was broke and couldn't afford to contribute anything to the household. So while I was paying $350 a month to share a basement room, Ashley was living there completely free. But wait, it gets worse. Ashley had been getting unemployment benefits the whole time, almost $400 a week. Plus, she'd gotten a settlement from her divorce that she hadn't told anyone about. We're talking about a girl who had more money than me, living in my house for free, while I was being charged like some kind of criminal. When I confronted my parents about this, Dad actually had the nerve to say, "Ashley is going through a difficult time. We were just trying to help family." "And what am I?" I asked. "What have I been to you this whole time?" He couldn't answer that question, because the truth was becoming crystal clear. I wasn't family to them. I was an inconvenience, a problem to be solved, a person to be squeezed out so that Tyler and Jake could have their inheritance all to themselves. That evening, Patricia called with an update that made my day. "Emma, I've been going through the financial records your father provided. It looks like they've collected almost $4,000 in rent from various tenants over the past 2 years, including your cousin and apparently some of Tyler's friends who stayed here for extended periods. None of this money was ever reported to you as a co-owner. $4,000. Money that should have been split 3 ways, meaning I was owed over $1,300 just from past rent collections. And that didn't even count the money I'd paid them. But the best part? Patricia had discovered that my parents had actually remortgaged the house 6 months ago to pay for Jake's car and Tyler's credit card debt. They'd taken out a loan against property that wasn't entirely theirs, without getting permission from all the owners. That's a federal crime, Patricia told me. Mortgage fraud. Suddenly, my little family dispute was looking like it might involve the FBI. That night, I sat in my reclaimed bedroom, looking around at the space where I'd grown up, and I realized something important. I wasn't fighting for a house or money or even justice, really. I was fighting for the right to exist as an equal member of my own family. And if they couldn't give me that, then maybe it was time to stop pretending we were a family at all. You guys, I need to tell you how this whole mess ended, because honestly, even I couldn't have predicted the way everything played out, and I promise you the ending is going to leave you absolutely speechless. So there I was, in the middle of a legal battle with my own parents, feeling like my world had completely fallen apart. But sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, the universe has a way of surprising you. 3 days after the mortgage fraud revelation, I got a call that changed everything. It was from Marcus Webb. Remember Tyler's friend who'd been practically living on our couch? Turns out Marcus had heard about the lawsuit through the family gossip network, and he had some information I definitely needed to hear. "Emma," he said nervously, "I think you should know that Tyler and Jake have been planning to sell the house as soon as Jake turns 30. They've already been talking to real estate agents, but that wasn't even the bombshell. Marcus told me that my brothers had been bragging about how they were going to use my rent money to fix up the house before selling it, essentially using my own money to increase the property value before cutting me out of the profits. When I told Patricia about this, she literally laughed out loud. "Emma, your brothers just handed us a slam dunk case. What they're describing is called unjust enrichment, and it's going to cost them big time. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming, not even me. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my room when I heard arguing coming from downstairs. Loud arguing. Apparently, Tyler and Jake were fighting about money, specifically about who was going to pay for the lawyer they'd had to hire to defend against my lawsuit. That's when I heard Jake say something that made me grab my phone and hit record. "This is all Emma's fault for being such a greedy bitch. We should have just kicked her out the day she graduated. Yeah. Well, now Dad says we might lose the house entirely if we can't prove we were acting in good faith, Tyler replied. Good faith? Dude, we've been planning to screw her over since Grandpa died. We just got caught. I had it. On recording. A confession that they'd been intentionally trying to defraud me from the very beginning. When Patricia heard that recording, she smiled bigger than I'd ever seen anyone smile. Emma, I think it's time we had a conversation with your family's lawyer about settling this case. The settlement meeting was held at Patricia's office. Mom, Dad, Tyler, and Jake sat on one side of the conference table with their lawyer, a nervous-looking guy who kept wiping sweat off his forehead. Patricia and I sat on the other side. Here's what's going to happen, Patricia began. My client is prepared to offer a very generous settlement to resolve this matter quickly and quietly. Their lawyer started to object, but Patricia held up her hand. Mr. Mitchell and his sons are going to transfer their shares of the property to Emma immediately. In exchange, Emma will pay them fair market value for their shares over the next 5 years, interest-free. Additionally, they will reimburse Emma for all rent payments she's made, plus damages for fraud and unjust enrichment. Dad's face went purple. That's ridiculous. We're not giving up our house. Mr. Mitchell, their lawyer said quietly, I think you should consider this offer very carefully. Because here's the thing they didn't know. Patricia had done her homework. If we went to trial and won, which we definitely would with the recording and all the evidence we had, my parents could face criminal charges for mortgage fraud. Tyler and Jake could be charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. They could all end up in jail. The settlement offer meant they could walk away with money in their pockets and clean criminal records. It took them about 5 minutes to realize they didn't have a choice. I walked out of that office as the sole owner of a $280,000 house. The house I'd grown up in, the house where I'd been treated like a stranger, was now entirely mine. But the best part? The absolutely perfect ending to this whole story. I decided not to kick them out. Instead, I offered them the chance to rent rooms from me. Tyler and Jake would pay $400 each per month for their bedrooms. Mom and Dad could stay in the master bedroom for $600 per month. Ashley? She had 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Tyler and Jake moved out within a week. They couldn't handle the idea of paying their little sister rent. Mom and Dad lasted about a month before they found a condo across town. Today, I live in my beautiful house with 3 amazing roommates I found through the university. We split the mortgage payment 4 ways, which means I'm basically living for free while building equity in my own property. I've got a great job at a marketing firm in Grand Rapids, and honestly, I've never been happier. The house that was supposed to trap me ended up setting me free. You guys, if you're dealing with family drama or people who are trying to take advantage of you, please don't stay quiet like I almost did. Stand up for yourself, fight for what's right, and remember that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who will hurt you the worst. Thank you so much for watching this crazy journey with me. Please hit that like button if this story shocked you as much as it shocked me to live through it. Drop a comment letting me know what you think about family loyalty versus standing up for yourself, and definitely follow the channel, because I have more wild stories coming your way. Trust me, this is just the beginning. Sometimes the quiet ones surprise everyone, including themselves.